Well, the numbers just keep rising. More than 50 people in 4 states have now been diagnosed with the measles, linked to visits to Disneyland in mid-December. Officials say many patients in the Disneyland outbreak were simply not vaccinated.
Getting everybody vaccinated is so important because trying to contain these infections can really be difficult. There's a lot of information out there that can be confusing or contradictory, and if people don't get immunized as a result, that's a problem.
Skipping shots has become a growing trend. Some parents opt out for their children based on personal beliefs, while others encourage mom and dad to do their homework. Rebecca Estep says her son suffered a severe reaction after being immunized.
I think parents that have chosen not to vaccinate realize that they are taking somewhat of a risk, but it's a calculated risk. They may have seen vaccine injury in their own families or by their own neighbors, and they're just questioning.
Measles is highly contagious and can take up to 12 days to show up. Symptoms include cough, fever, and a rash. And Lisa, it's just scary. It goes beyond the Disneyland outbreak. The Centers for Disease Control says there have been more than 600 measles cases reported in 27 states, and that includes Virginia.
But Jimmy, it's not just measles that are raising concern. We've heard of additional childhood diseases making a comeback recently. Diseases like mumps, whooping cough, even chickenpox. Health experts say it all comes down to prevention.
Oh, put him on.
Life is pretty carefree for little Jonah during his stroller snooze in the park. But there's a bit more pressure for his parents, David and Devora, as they decide what's best for their son.
We heard that there was a recent outbreak, and of course with our little one, we're having a conversation about vaccinations in general.
As news of measles and mumps outbreaks spread, many are curious why we're seeing diseases resurface that have been under control in this country for more than a decade.
It is preventable. I think it's a wake-up call.
Dr. Dean Blumberg says measles, a potentially deadly disease, has made a dramatic comeback recently.
Measles is one of the most contagious infectious diseases around.
The CDC logged 100 cases in 2001, but that number jumped to 600 last year in the U.S. Blumberg says some parents are choosing not to vaccinate their kids, and that is one of the main drivers behind the spike.
They don't believe that measles is a serious disease, and they're worried about vaccine adverse effects. And because of that, their children are susceptible and they can get the disease and then they can transmit to others.
Blumberg says worries linking vaccines to autism are unfounded, and parents are putting their kids and the public at risk by not getting vaccinated.
Measles results in hundreds of thousands of children dying every year worldwide.
The Philippines has had a continuing outbreak of the measles. Last year, many of the cases likely originated from that country. Well, this is not the first time we've addressed vaccines. You may recall Dr. James Cockey from the Wicomico County Health Department joined us to discuss these childhood diseases making a comeback. He says before we had effective vaccines, up to 500,000 kids would get sick every year with the measles. He says the numbers have been rising over the past couple of years. Not as bad as 50 years ago, though. Dr. Cockey says as far as vaccinations, their impact is most important when it comes to public health. Well, vaccines also go a long way to protect us from a very serious bacterial infection, meningitis. That's why a famous photographer is using her camera to raise awareness to this preventable disease. Jimmy has more on that.
She's traveled the world taking unforgettable pictures, particularly the children. You know, the ones, the cute little baby sleeping as a bee or a flower. Well, now Ann Geddes is focusing on a different way to show children. This time, she's showing us firsthand the devastating effects of meningitis survivors. And joins us now to tell us why. And she's joined by Dr. Paul Lee, who specializes in pediatric infectious diseases. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Dr. Lee, help me out here. For those of us who haven't really been exposed to it, what is meningitis?
Well, hopefully you haven't been exposed because it's a terrible, terrible disease. It will start off with often like flu-like illness. It's actually an infection of the protective membrane that covers the brain and spinal cord. It will follow symptoms very similar to the flu, and Bacterial meningitis is rare. What differentiates it is you start to develop very severe symptoms, very severe headache, inability to look at bright light, a very stiff neck, and then a purple rash in meningococcal meningitis starts to develop on the body and spreads. If that appears, you're in real trouble because within hours you could be dead. And if you survive, you might end up losing your arms and legs.
Okay, who's most at risk for getting it?
Who's most at risk is a group that you probably wouldn't suspect, 15 to 24-year-olds, adolescents. Those adolescents, in particular, not only at higher risk, but they're also at higher risk of the complications. That 18-year-old, say from Salisbury, who's playing football, he's far more likely to die than a 6-month-old infant from this disease. And if he survives, again, he very well could end up losing his arms and legs.
Okay, so this is preventable?
It's absolutely preventable, and the one-word answer is vaccines. The vaccine on the current schedule covers 4 of the 5 types of meningococcal meningitis. The 5th type, serogroup B, it's important that I think parents go to their doctor and ask about more information on how to protect themselves against the serogroup B.
Dr. Lee, thank you. And with all the pictures you've taken from all over the world, why these?
Well, this is a pretty important message, and it's a pretty blunt message when you think about children losing limbs within a matter of hours. But, you know, when I was first invited to do this series, it took me back to when my girls were very small and there was a serious outbreak of this same disease in our community. And a little girl lost both arms and both legs, and her family were generous enough to share their story in the media and alerted to other parents to watch out for these symptoms. And so what I wanted to create with this series was a situation where any parent viewing any of these images would surely be moved to action.
Wow. Okay, so tell us more about your book, Protecting Our Tomorrows, Portraits of Meningococcal Disease.
Well, it's available. Look, go to my website and we can let you know where you can download this book, or go straight to Apple iBooks, and it's a free download. This is a global awareness campaign. You can look at the images of these 15 survivors and you can see twins behind me, and one of them was affected by the disease and lost most of her limbs, and the other one was absolutely fine. So meningococcal disease is rare, it's random, and it's devastating. So you can see the survivors, and you can listen, read their stories and see the photos of them with their families, because family involvement is very, very important in the recovery process. And more importantly, learn more about meningococcal disease and what you can do to prevent it.
And Geddes, Dr. Lee, thank you so much for sharing that with us this afternoon. Now, if you'd like more information on meningitis and this work of art, just go to our website, WBOC.com, and click on our picture at the top of the page. We always want to protect our little ones, but what if your little bundle of joy was born with teeth? Up next, we hear about the little girl making medical news with her smile, what it means, and if it's dangerous to her health. Plus, is your favorite soda dangerous to your health? We're going to hear from the experts on the popular soda being known as a dentist's worst nightmare. And we hear the top reasons why people don't make a dental appointment. Plus, how one local office puts their patients at ease. DelmarvaLife will be right back.